The tragedy wasn't in the crowns or the courts, it was in the children. One after another across centuries and empires, royal heirs were born not as blessings, but as ticking time bombs. Each generation carried the weight of too much closeness, too many shared ancestors, too many repeated genes. In the pursuit of unbroken bloodlines, Europe's royal families sacrificed health, sanity, and even humanity. Let's begin in Spain with Joan of Castile, better known by history as Juana la Loca, Joan the Mad. She was born from the union of second cousins Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the Catholic monarchs who united Spain under a single throne. Politically, their marriage was a triumph. Genetically, it was a beginning of decline. Joan inherited not only their power, but also their instability. She was brilliant and deeply spiritual. But when she married Philip the Handsome, a Habsburg prince known for his beauty and arrogance, Joan's love became obsession. Philip humiliated her, cheated on her, and mocked her devotion. When she caught him with a mistress, Joan reportedly stabbed the woman in the face. And when Philip died suddenly at 28, Joan refused to bury him, keeping his rotting corpse by her side for months, kissing his decaying skin, sleeping next to the casket. They had 6 children together. And with that union, the Habsburg and Spanish bloodlines fused, solidifying both an empire and a curse. Their son, Charles V, inherited a united empire that stretched across Europe and the Americas. He was the most powerful man of his time, Holy Roman Emperor, King of Spain, ruler of the New World. But behind the glory, Charles was already unraveling. He suffered from mandibular prognathism, a severe deformity now known as the Habsburg jaw. His lower jaw jutted out so far he could barely chew or speak clearly. He also endured epileptic seizures, intense depression, and a lifelong obsession with religious purity that bordered on fanaticism. Despite being emperor of half the world, Charles eventually abdicated his throne and retired to a monastery plagued by anxiety, guilt, and a decaying body he no longer understood. He had passed the Habsburg jaw and the genetic instability to his son. Philip II of Spain, Charles's heir, was both a devout ruler and a man caught in a collapsing bloodline. Obsessed with religious order and dynastic control, Philip married 4 women, each related to him. His first wife, Maria Manuela of Portugal, was more than a cousin. They shared all 4 grandparents. She died at 17, just days after giving birth to a son so disturbed, so unstable, that even Philip, rigid, pious, and cold, couldn't handle him. That son, Don Carlos, became a walking nightmare. Prone to violent rages, self-harm, and sadistic outbursts, he was locked away in a tower and left to waste away. He died at just 23. Philip's second wife was Mary Thrush of England, known as Bloody Mary. They were cousins. She died childless. His third wife, Elizabeth of Valois, a distant cousin, died in childbirth. His fourth wife was his niece, Anna of Austria. With her, he had 5 children. Only one survived. This was no longer coincidence. This was compounding collapse. But the fall reached its grotesque peak with Charles II of Spain, the final Habsburg ruler of the Spanish line, and perhaps the most tragically inbred monarch in European history. Charles's parents, Philip IV and Mariana of Austria, were uncle and niece. Their family tree didn't branch, it circled. Charles had fewer unique ancestors than the average farm dog. All 4 of his grandparents were descendants of Joan the Mad. The results were catastrophic. Charles couldn't speak until the age of 4. He couldn't walk until he was 8. He suffered seizures, constant drooling, and severe developmental delays. His jaw was so deformed he couldn't chew solid food. He was described by courtiers as feeble in mind, grotesque in appearance, and perpetually on the brink of death. Despite being king, Charles was more prisoner than ruler, kept isolated, manipulated by nobles, married off twice in desperate hopes of producing an heir. But he was impotent, infertile, and increasingly delusional. When he died at 38, the Spanish monarchy died with him. His autopsy was a nightmare: a heart the size of a peppercorn, a single black testicle, a skull filled with water, gangrenous intestines, no blood in his body. Historians say he died of poison 200 years before he was born. That poison was pedigree. But the story doesn't end in Spain. Across the Channel, Queen Victoria reigned over the British Empire at its peak. She was the grandmother of Europe. Her 9 children married into almost every royal house on the continent. But Victoria carried a secret, a mutation, one that would haunt her descendants for generations. Victoria was a carrier of hemophilia, a genetic disorder that prevents blood from clotting properly. Her son, Prince Leopold, suffered frequent bleeds from minor injuries. He died at age 30 after slipping on a staircase. The fall should have been harmless. It killed him. 2 of Victoria's daughters, Alice and Beatrice, also carried the gene. Alice's son, Friedrich, died after falling from a window. He was only 2. Her daughter, Alexandra, married Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Their only son, Alexei, inherited the disease. Alexei's illness became a state secret, one that destabilized the Russian Empire. His mother turned to a mystic healer named Rasputin, whose influence over the royal court sowed distrust, scandal, and chaos. The Romanovs were eventually overthrown and executed in 1918. Hemophilia didn't kill the Russian Empire, but it played a role in its unraveling, and Victoria's granddaughter, Victoria Eugenie, became Queen of Spain. Her son bled uncontrollably after a circumcision. 2 of her children died from internal bleeding after car accidents. Her marriage collapsed. Her bloodline broke. What began as royal ambition had turned into hereditary devastation, not from war, not from revolution, but from within, from the quiet, unrelenting decay of incestuous tradition. One by one, these monarchs became victims of the very system they were born to uphold. Each crowned child carried the legacy not just of empires, but of centuries of genetic sabotage. What was once seen as purity was in fact a slow-motion self-destruction disguised as nobility. And the throne, in the end, could not save them. For centuries, the crown was inseparable from blood. Not metaphorical blood, not loyalty or sacrifice, actual biological blood, a legacy so sacred, so heavily guarded, that monarchs were willing to risk deformity, disease, and dynastic collapse just to preserve it. The result was a lineage of rulers who barely ruled, held together not by strength, but by genetic fragility. But something changed. The old world burned. The thrones cracked. The divine right of kings was questioned not by invading armies, but by people with newspapers, microscopes, and revolutions in their eyes. And the royal families of Europe, once locked inside palaces gilded by tradition, were forced to confront the cost of their obsession with purity. The fall of the Habsburgs marked more than the end of a dynasty. It signaled a shift in consciousness. The people were no longer awed by the idea of royal blood. They were horrified by it. The same blood that once symbolized power had become a symbol of cruelty, madness, and genetic failure. What had been sacred now looked monstrous. By the end of World War I, many of Europe's monarchies were either abolished or deeply reformed. The Russian Romanovs were executed in a basement. The German and Austro-Hungarian empires crumbled. Even in countries where the monarchy remained, its grip on politics loosened. Kings and queens were no longer rulers. They were relics. And with that fall came a slow, reluctant reckoning. The aristocracy began to admit what had long been ignored, that intermarriage wasn't preserving legacy, it was poisoning it. That bloodline obsession had not protected their houses, it had corroded them from within. And so in the wake of revolution and rot, a new question emerged. Could royalty survive without its blood obsession? The answer came slowly, but definitively. Beginning in the 20th century, monarchs and their heirs began to choose partners not based on ancestry, but on affection, sometimes even unthinkably on love. In 1923, King George V of the United Kingdom made a radical declaration: his children could marry commoners. It was a quiet but profound revolution. The next generations took that freedom seriously. Queen Elizabeth II married Prince Philip, a distant cousin. Yes, but also a man with outside military experience, an independent mind, and no interest in continuing the rigid rituals of courtly breeding. Their children, in turn, broke more rules. Prince Charles married Lady Diana Spencer, a woman of noble birth, but not royal blood. Their son, Prince William, chose Catherine Middleton, his university classmate. No nobility, no title, just a commoner with poise, intelligence, and her own legacy. And perhaps most symbolically, Prince Harry, the youngest son of Diana, married Meghan Markle, a biracial American actress. A divorced woman of mixed heritage raised far from castles and ceremony. To the old order, it was scandal. To the modern world, it was survival. The monarchy wasn't just adapting, it was evolving. The shift isn't unique to Britain. Across Europe, once sacred bloodlines have begun to open their gates. In Sweden, Crown Princess Victoria married her personal trainer. In Norway, Crown Prince Haakon married a single mother with a past. In Monaco, Prince Albert chose a South African Olympic swimmer. The message is clear: the future of royalty isn't built on blood, it's built on choice. And the consequences, remarkably positive. Without the pressure to intermarry, the genetic health of modern royals has vastly improved. The haunting legacy of hemophilia, once known as the royal disease, has nearly vanished from European courts. The infamous Habsburg jaw is now a historical curiosity, not a living trait. And the psychological toll of being born to breed, of being raised to marry your cousin for land, is finally fading. What we are witnessing is not just a cultural shift, but a philosophical one. The value of monarchy in today's world is no longer tied to genetic supremacy, but to symbolic leadership. Royals are expected to serve, to represent, to modernize, not to rule by birthright, not to perpetuate sacred bloodlines at the cost of their own children's well-being. And while the idea of monarchy still divides opinion, one truth is hard to deny: it has survived because it has changed. The royal families that refused to evolve were buried by time. The ones that endured are those that traded inbreeding for humanity, tradition for relevance, and bloodlines for love stories. There are still challenges, of course. Royal life remains suffocating. Public scrutiny, tabloid pressure, and the weight of ceremonial duty still create an unnatural existence. But at the very least, the future heirs of Europe won't be haunted by the same genetic ghosts as their ancestors. They won't drool in public at age 30. They won't be born with a heart the size of a peppercorn. They won't be prisoners of their own DNA. Because now they're marrying people, not pedigrees. In many ways, this evolution mirrors a broader human journey. For centuries, power meant control. It meant purity. It meant preserving the old ways no matter the cost. But history teaches us that what doesn't evolve dies. And even the most gilded bloodlines must eventually bend to that truth. The crown, for all its ceremony and symbolism, no longer demands perfect blood. It demands something far more radical: love, freedom, and choice. If this story moved you, shocked you, or opened your eyes to the hidden truths behind royal history, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves dark history, and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from the shadows of power. Every view, comment, and click helps us bring forgotten history back to life.